Hello, it's Anya. Welcome to the channel. In this episode, we'll take a look at a new champion flying around my city. As you can see, I haven't talked to her yet, but Seluna is here. Let's see what she has to say. We'll skip this so we don't waste any time. As you can see, we can upgrade her to legendary. And let's see what legendary has to offer on the battlefield. And let's say, I've already taken a look at her, and she seems quite interesting. But before we get to the skills, I remind you to give her a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. If you appreciate this content more, you can become a supporter of this channel, for which I thank you in advance. So, let's click that like button here. Let's see. And let's see Seluna's legendary version. Let's click on the details. Now we have everything she can do listed. Here's a preview of her skill. The skill itself doesn't seem to be changing. The basic version has a similar one, but let's move on to the skills. Number 1, Moon's Edge. The attack range is very long, so it can be paired with any unit type, even mages. And this damage will be dealt at maximum range. It deals damage to the selected legion with a damage factor of 1800 and grants 1 stack of the Moon Moth mark. Each time the legion performs a normal attack, it has a 20% chance to gain 1 stack of the Moon Moth mark. Interestingly, it has a 60% chance when commanding a flying legion. Each stack of the Moon Moth mark allows the legion to ignore 5% of the enemy's defense. The maximum number of stacks is 6. So, we see that the first skill is strongly tied to flying legions. And from what I know, from the information I've gathered so far, our legion must fly, so we also need a flying deputy and a flying pet. This is very, very important, because you see, then we have a 60% chance of getting 1 stack of moth, which will allow us to quickly reach the maximum number of stacks, which is 6, so we'll be able to ignore up to 30% of the opponent's defense. As you know, we don't have many buffs for defense, and most of those buffs can come from artifacts, so mages tend to prefer artifacts that deal damage, so if we're fighting mages, ignoring defense will be very useful. Infantry have a few artifacts that increase our defense. However, the dude has a lot of HP. The new G5 infantry also has an artifact that gives us life, from what I remember, just to make sure I'm not lying to you here. Let's check it out now. But I have a feeling this artifact gives us HP. Exactly. So bypassing defense can help us break through infantry. So, a very cool ability. We just have to remember that our legion has to be able to fly. So, generally speaking, I'd say she's more of a mage hero, but we'll talk about pairs and unit types later in the video. Let's move on to skill number 2. It's a lot of text, but we'll go through it together. Quickly, Wings of Elegy. During field battles, the legion deals damage to the selected legion every time it loses 20% of its units. The damage ratio is 75 times the number of Moon Moth mark stacks. We can have 6 stacks, so this damage is quite significant, but remember that we don't want to lose our HP. Regardless, I think if we keep this legion at 40%, we'll use this skill 3 times, so it'll always be some extra damage. If a legion is defeated in the field, it consumes all Moon Moth mark stacks to immediately deal damage to the enemy legion that defeated it. The damage ratio is 75 times the number of Moon Moth mark stacks. The damage depends on the number of units in the legion when leaving the city. So, as we can see with a full legion, the damage will be higher. If someone has SVPA and 310,000 units in their legion, the damage will be even higher. However, the most interesting effect of this ability is at the very bottom. If the legion survives the battle, it consumes all stacks of Moon Moth mark to receive healing, with a healing ratio of 125 times the number of Moon Moth mark stacks. There are a lot of infantry on the battlefield. These legions often fall, so we'll have quite a lot of healing, I think. So, these Moon Moth marks will be used very often. Therefore, remember to have a flying legion to build up those stacks quickly, because then we have a 60% chance of 1 stack when attacking with a normal attack. So, I remind you again that to use Seluna at 100%, you need a full flying legion. Generally, the damage from this ability will be low. Maybe that last bit of damage when our legion falls, but do we want our legion to fall? Well, that's up to you. In any case, healing will be quite enjoyable. Let's move on to skill number 3, Guardian Breaker. The Legion's melee units gain 15% attack. The Legion's ranged units deal 15% more damage. Let's be honest, damage day, meaning 15% more damage, is a better buff than 15% attack. So this skill here tells us we want Seluna in ranged units. When commanding a flying legion, the legion's melee units gain an additional 30% attack, and its ranged units deal 30% more damage. So what do we have here? 30-45% damage delta. If we're flying, the only playable flying unit is Celestials, so we'll probably be playing mages here. If you're playing a mage, I think Seluna will be a really good choice. She'll be quite strong and should break out of the meta. She should make it into the meta somewhere around here. Personally, I'd put her somewhere in the top 4 or 5 mages for now. Of course, we'll still be waiting for some interesting reports from real fights, but that will take time. However, for now, I'd put her really, really high in this ranking. Let's move on to skill number 4. All is one. The Legion gains 10% march speed and 10% hydrogen phosphide. While commanding a flying Legion, they gain an additional 20% march speed and 30% hydrogen phosphide. These are also additional stats, so we can have a total of 30% march speed and 40% hydrogen phosphide. These buffs are no joke, and they look really cool. Just a reminder, we have to fly while awakened. Let's see what awakening gives us. Moonmoth Shadow. After gaining the Moonmoth mark, Legion deals 7.5% more damage for 4 seconds. Up to 4 stacks. Hey, this awakening is powerful, right? This awakening is mega powerful. The awakening itself grants us another 30% delta damage. This is a powerful awakening. And of course, it's dependent on our stacks, so we need our Legion to fly, so we can gain those stacks really, really quickly. Remember, when we defeat the enemy Legion and that Legion falls, we'll lose our stacks and heal ourselves, so we'll be relying heavily on those stacks here. So I'll tell you right now, if you want to use Seluna, who is truly mega powerful, she has powerful buffs, right? Seluna's buffs are powerful. She has powerful buffs, tons of delta damage. There's just one thing, but we have to fly. I know some people are wondering if it's worth it, because then they won't be able to play a sand lizard, because sand lizards can't fly. However, I think it won't be a problem if we play 4 sand lizards. And if we throw in a fairy dragon, for example, the rest of those sand lizards will still heal Seluna. Seluna will also heal herself, so she shouldn't go down quickly. Plus, she has a lot of extra HP, so she should last a very, very long time. So, after learning her skills, I'd say she's even in the top 3 mages right now. Remember, G5 mages are just around the corner. We'll also look at them when they come out, but for now, I'd say Seluna is definitely in the meta. Seluna has a lot of powerful buffs. It'll be hard to deal with that, right? And speaking of talent trees, we'll be using the epic version of talent trees here, because talent trees don't change. So here we have 3 trees for you. No, I'd rather avoid, I'm telling you right now, I'd rather avoid playing Seluna in infantry legions. I'd also rather avoid it in cavalry legions, and the only exception when it comes to cavalry is flying eagles. We'll get to flying eagles later. I'd say this tree is universal. Yes, it's suitable for archers, mages, and flying cavalry. We have a PvP tree here. We have more skill damage, even more delta damage. We have more damage from the frenzy ability, so all of this should work for both cavalry and mages. Would I use her in Bedrock? I probably wouldn't use her here. In Bedrock, the flying hero for archers is Frgar, from what I remember. And only Frgar. There's also Krek, but we'll skip him. So, in my opinion, I wouldn't pair Seluna with Frgar. And unfortunately, or fortunately, Seluna doesn't have a place in marksman at the moment. Sure, this march would do something. Of course, this march would do something, but it will definitely do much more in mages. So here you have a PvP tree, which also has quite a bit of healing. We're very fast. Mages complain about speed. We could play aggressively with this legion here if we gave ourselves a lot of speed. Seluna also has a lot of march speed in her kit, so you can flank somewhere. You can flank somewhere. Let's move on to tree number 2. This tree would be perfect for mages and cavalry, I'd say. And again, for cavalry, I'd pair her with 4 on deal. As for mages, I'd pair her with Bertrand or Aetius. I'd rather have a damage dealing champion, because Seluna has a ton, really a ton. We don't see it here, but she has a ton of delta damage, which increases our damage output. I don't deal that damage with my frenzy ability, so we'd be a bit burned. Sure, it affects survivability, but I think if we have Seluna, we want to deal damage. And the only flying champions who deal damage are mages, maybe even overall flying heroes. We have Bachorn, Bertrand, and Aetius. We have Tiha, but Tiha doesn't deal damage, so I wouldn't combine her with Tiha to fully utilize all the delta damage percentages that will increase our damage. So, overall, I'd say Bertrand and Seluna could be a very strong combination. Sure, we can still use Bachorn, but let's be honest, Bertrand deals significantly more damage. At Awakening, it's up to 1500 skill damage, and Sombran also has powerful attack buffs, so we definitely won't be short on that damage. And the last tree you'll see here will be a general tree. What's cool about this tree is the talent, which will grant us a lot of rage, so we can simply spam our rage skills. Remember, we have high damage. Here, we have even more rage. Of course, we increase our damage from hero skills. This tree could be interesting. We also have a 10% penalty to heavy units. We have less skill damage for mages. Remember, we have a new hero, Elenir, who, if I'm not mistaken, counts the damage from her first passive as hero skill damage because it's red, so it's always worth reducing it a bit, right? We'll have more units in the Legion, which will increase our overall damage. And, of course, more rage, and I also prefer more rage here to really spam these skills. However, if I had to choose just one skill tree, yes, the best one, I think the classic skill tree is really strong. But this tree also seems really interesting to me. Yes, I would definitely test this tree to see if it works, but if you want something proven, then I recommend a skill tree. As for pairings, first of all, I wouldn't put it in infantry. We don't have strong and flying heroes in archers, so we're left with 2 types of units. Yes, the first type of unit, of course, is cavalry. Here, it will be perfect in eagles. I think it will be really powerful in flying eagles. And here, of course, we can combine it with 4 on deal. We can combine it with Braithorn, or possibly with Craig. But the cream of the crop, the Selunks, well, let's be honest, there will be mages. They will be mages. Of course, we need characters who can fly. We need, in my opinion, we need characters who deal damage. The more, the better, to get the most out of all those damage deltas from Seluna. And here, in my opinion, Bertrand comes out on top. Of course, we can also use Aetius, because Aetius can still give us a bit of rage, a bit of that frenzy, so we'll be even faster, spamming our abilities even more. So I think both heroes will be really playable with Seluna. Which one will be better? I think it could be Bertrand after all, but seriously, don't ignore Aetius. Of course, all this will require testing, but I think Tiha can handle it. Well, Tiha can handle it, of course she can, but I think we'll have more potential with Bertrand or Aetius. We can use this one in our ground legions, of course. We all know it's super strong, and we can continue to use it, whether with Mew or, for example, with Lilia, whatever you think. As for combat pets, remember that your pet has to be able to fly. And we decided we wanted them to be mages. We decided Seluna would do best in magic legions. A flying pet with the highest damage. Well, let's be honest. A seraphic fairy dragon. So that's the #1 pet I'd recommend. There's also the dark dragon, which flies, but it has lower damage, so this dark dragon, remember, in my opinion, is a dragon for rallying, for garrisons, for one-on-one fights. The fairy dragon, on the other hand, can hit 3 targets. The pet will also benefit from our legion's damage deltas, so that damage will be truly powerful. As for artifacts, well, we can always use Bertrand, and if we're playing Bertrand, we can use an orb of mirage. Really, when it comes to artifacts, we can use anything we want. Ideally, something that deals damage, of course. Even Phoenix Eye might be bright, but I think if I had to choose something interesting for aiming, the best artifact here seems to be the Mirage Orb. And we have Bertrand, we have the Mirage Orb, and we have Seluna, which will increase all damage by a really large amount. So those are my predictions. We'll still be waiting for more reports, of course, but I think this Bertrand-Seluna pairing could dominate right now, dominate. Heaven, I'm only curious about Atius, right? Because Atius is also very often overlooked, and he's a really solid hero for an epic hero. But you know, a legend is a legend. So if you're wondering if it's worth getting a legendary version of Seluna, well, if you're using mages, I'd say absolutely, absolutely. Remember, you also need to have either Bertrand or you can use Atius, but the most important thing is for this legion to be flying so we have all the buffs active. So, when asked if it's worth making Seluna, I think it is, but you need Bertrand or Atius. Of course, having Atius isn't a problem, but I think Bertrand could do really, really well here. Finally, I'll show you the packs you can buy for Seluna if you buy her. We'll use Ganza's video here. We have access to such packs. I think you might recognize them from Mew if you bought her. From what I know, they weren't very cost-effective in terms of tokens, considering the number of tokens to the price. But if someone wants to make Seluna as quickly as possible and wants to save the remaining tokens for G5 heroes or G5 mages, then I definitely think they could consider something like this. But if nothing has changed regarding Mew, because honestly, I didn't count it here, these packs, if I remember correctly, were quite unprofitable and were mostly reserved for whales. So, we've reached the end. My opinion is that Seluna will be a really strong hero. She can guarantee us a ton of damage. Her skills are truly very strong, and I think all of that will be reflected in the reports. However, she's a character, in my opinion, exclusively for mages. She might also be able to be used in flying cavalry. She should be able to handle it there as well, but the other unit types, well, I don't see her anywhere else except in mages and flying cavalry. So, if you're not playing mages or flying cavalry, I don't think you need to bother with Seluna. I'll say goodbye to you here. You know what to do. Hang in there.